Hey guys, welcome to Star Wars Timeline. Today we're doing a character highlight on Kestis, one of my favorite Star Wars video game characters. We'll take a look at his background, check out his personality traits and his Jedi powers, as well as discuss my personal impression of this character and what I hope to see in the future. Now guys, very briefly, if you consider this is the greatest Star Wars YouTube video you saw today, please consider subscribing to my channel. I would really appreciate your support. Now let's get into it and first talk about Kestis' background. He's a young Jedi Knight that we see in the Star Wars video game Jedi Fallen Order, released in November of 2019. He is a survivor of the Order 66, and he was also a young Padawan to the Jedi Master Jar Topal. Now there's quite a similar parallel to Kanan Jarrus from the Rebels show, which we also see another young Padawan who outlives his master, and he was able to flee and go into the hiding during the times of the Jedi Purge. He finds some asylum on a planet called Braca, and he starts working there as some sort of a mechanic or a rigger, and he finds a steady job there where he kind of like, dives his head below the surface, so to speak, and, he's away from all of the Jedi dealings, and he doesn't want to have anything to do with them or the Empire. But unfortunately, things don't go as he wants, and he's being discovered on that planet by the Inquisitors, specifically by the one that leads that investigation, the Second Sister, who is also a grand villain in that video game, as well as some of the comics associated with that game called also Jedi Fallen Order. He's saved by a group of unlikely friends by Siri Junda and Grease Drutus, by a young, not young, I'm sorry, and also a former Jedi Knight, as we discovered throughout the game. And together they set on an adventure. They go to a planet called Bogano, where he follows the path laid out by the Jedi Master Eno Cordova, or his holographic projection, and he instructs him in following a very specific path and discover the secrets of the Zaffo people, an extinct race who left behind this very rich kind of like material culture and temples and their secrets they discovered in the Force and so forth. And what Kestis is to find is a special holocron, which we find through the events of the game, hold the list of Force-sensitive potential children that could possibly become Jedi Knights in the future. And of course, that's something that the Inquisitors and the Emperor Palpatine also want to get their hands on. So he follows on his journey, this kind of like odyssey through different planets, and he discovers different Zaffo race artifacts and temples. And together with his friends that he enlists some help from others, Force sensitives, they discover this holocron, which he decides to not use. And he says, look, I need to follow the path of the Jedi, and I need to restore the Jedi Order, but this is not the way to do it. It is just too dangerous. So the story ends with him disposing of this holocron, but taking on the mantle of the future of the Jedi. Now, let's talk about Kestis' personality traits, and later I'll briefly discuss his Jedi powers as well. After the Republic's fall, he becomes a very quiet and reserved young man. He's very sheltered because he felt betrayed by this battalion of the clones, the 13th Battalion that he fought alongside with his master. And after that betrayal, it becomes such a trauma for him, which we see kind of like through the flashbacks of the video game, that he becomes very, into himself, and he's not very open to strangers. And he doesn't like speaking about his past, and every time it's brought up, he kind of like feels anger, which he knows he's not supposed to. And he feels responsible for the death of his master, Jar Topal, which is quite a weight on your shoulders, especially when you're a young Jedi Knight, and it's your personality and your character is so volatile when you're a young person. And of course, it was a very traumatizing experience for him. But throughout the story, he begins to open up, and he makes friends, as I said, with from very unlikely persons, a group of pilots. One of them he later discovers was actually a Jedi Knight during the Clone Wars, and they also enlist the help of a Dathomiri witch, which who would have known, because historically the Jedi and Dathomiri witches have been known to be enemies. But something happens here, and he's able to walk the path of balance and not see through the lens of good versus evil, or the Jedi versus Sith or some other factions, but he's able to see the good in all people. And we also know that he's very kind to animals, and he understands that some of them act of violence not because they want to be aggressive, but because it's their predator nature. Like in the beginning of the game, there's a very cool scene where he helps this Shiyu bird on Kashyyyk, and he sees that the creature is wounded, and he actually uses healing powers that he has a limited capacity of to kind of like restore the bird and help it out. It becomes a mount for him throughout the adventure. And later on, when you travel to Dathomir planet in the video game, there's a bat-like huge pterodactyl creature which does attack him because, that planet is shrouded in a dark side and it's a very foreboding and dangerous place. But even after the creature, is being destroyed in the game, he feels compassion for it, which just shows you how kind of a kind-hearted and gentle he is inside as a person, which I found pretty interesting for somebody who's a Jedi. He's almost like this warrior poet. He knows when to, pick up the sword and start fighting, which he does from the beginning of the game. But he also knows when to show compassion. And I found that he grows throughout this adventure of the video game and becomes quite a man. He grows from a boy to a young man and becomes confident in his steps that he's making as the Jedi Knight. And he makes this executive decision, which all of his friends support. He says, like, look, we acquired this artifact, we went on a pilgrimage, we got the holocron, and it has this very, very sensitive information that if it falls into the hands of the Empire and the Inquisitors, it could spell doom for the future of the galaxy. And he decides to dispose of this holocron and destroy it, which to me showed a progression of his character, how he becomes from this very quiet and reserved and angry young man to this Jedi Knight who takes on the mantle and actually Siri Junda Christians him as a knight aboard their ship, and he becomes a full-blown knight, and also in character as well. He starts making these very weighty and important decisions. And it was fun to watch how he interacts with his friends and builds the confidence along the way, and you could really start to see the future of the Jedi Knights in him. By the end of the game, you're rooting for him so much. I'm like, oh man, I hope there is a part 2 to this video game. I hope there's more material on Cal Kestis, because, he's now this full-blown Jedi Knight who would resist and fight the Empire during the Dark Times. Now, very briefly, let's talk about his powers and abilities. We learned that from the beginning of the game, when he is through the flashbacks, when he's a young Padawan, and because of the trauma of seeing the death of his master and escaping the Order 66, he becomes very traumatized, and a lot of his powers are not lost to him, but they're subdued, and he has to recover them throughout the course of the adventure. Naturally, the plot is built around a video game experience where they want you to progress and kind of like become stronger throughout the story, but it also functions really well for the character narratively, because it tells you that sometimes, just like Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi, who, shelters himself from the Force because he has been hurt so much by his nephew, Kylo Ren or Ben Skywalker. And same is here. You see a Jedi Knight who lives that lifestyle and dedicates himself to the Force, who can be very easily injured through these very traumatic experiences, and he has to acquire those powers back. And early on in the story, the powers that he has are the Force stasis. That's one of the abilities that he starts reacquiring back. And what Force stasis does is, in the game, what happens when Cal Kestis encounters several enemies at a time, he's able to freeze them. For a split second, they pause, and you have the ability to move forward and start attacking them. And as the game progresses and as the story evolves, he's able to reach into the Force and become even more powerful and freeze a wide range of enemies for longer periods of time and attack them, which I found was pretty awesome power. I believe it's something that we see in the Force Unleashed video games from early 2000s, I think 2008 or 10, somewhere around there, Force Unleashed 1 and 2 video games, where we also see a power where you're able to freeze your enemies. He also has a power which I absolutely love, that one of my favorite expanded universe characters Quinlan Vos has, and that is the power of psychometry. And it is something where you can pick up an artifact or somebody's lightsaber or another piece that has a lot of history and emotional feelings of the previous owner attached to it. A Jedi is able to, just from touching that object, kind of like tapped into it and get a sense of the previous owner of the things that happened to it. It also made a great sense for the kind of story they wanted to tell in the Jedi Fallen Order, because Cal Kestis goes on this pilgrimage, on this odyssey to discover the artifacts of a race of people that are long extinct. So how are you going to be able to do it? Obviously through his power. He's able to touch into certain objects, and there's even some flashbacks and visions that Cal Kestis has in the game, which I find was such an interesting treat visually to tell a story where you use that power and you go into a different kind of dreamlike dimension, and you're able to see a lot of these things that you wouldn't be able to see in real life in that world. He also attains the power to heal. As I mentioned before, he tries to heal that creature on Kashyyyk. And of course, to tailor, to suit the needs of the game, Cal Kestis has the traditional power of the Jedi. He has a force push, which becomes stronger, more powerful. He has a pull and force dash ability, which works really well in the game. He's able to zoom along the walls and stuff like that, and zoom past the enemies and start attacking them from their flanks and that kind of stuff. Because once again, it works really well for the game, but also it kind of describes who he is as a character. Now, when it comes to the dark side powers, it is something he's unable to resist on his own. By the end of the game, he confronts Darth Vader, and he narrowly escapes that encounter because he can't do something like the Vader does, which is the Force choke. And if it wasn't for, Siri Junda, he wouldn't be able to survive that encounter. Now, let's talk about my impression of Cal Kestis, and I also want to briefly mention what I expect to see in the future. First and foremost, I gotta say, the Jedi Fallen Order is my favorite Star Wars video game of all time. Yes, we had the Knights of the Old Republic back in the day. We had a whole bunch of different games. We had the Jedi, the Bounty Hunter, and so forth that delved in kind of like interesting different aspects of Star Wars. But I felt that the Fallen Order represents the essence of Star Wars. A young man, a story of coming of age, and becoming this heroic figure because destiny calls to him. And I saw a lot of parallels to Luke Skywalker. As I mentioned, it's a story of coming of age, and it shows with Cal Kestis that the Star Wars saga has so much more potential beyond just the Skywalker family. It proves the fact that the Force doesn't belong to the Jedi, or it doesn't belong to the Skywalker family. There are Force-sensitive people out there who are able to master the Force and become just as capable and influential and change the course of events for better. And that's what Cal Kestis does there. And you see a lot of kind of like parallels with young Luke Skywalker. Cal Kestis also has people who, give him a wisdom. He sees other people that he decides not to follow their path. That's Saw Gerrera. He sees those more extreme measures, and he says, okay, this is not the Jedi path. If I'm to wield this power, I need to be more balanced, and I need to really weigh my future actions. So that was really, really beautiful parallel there. I loved it. And Cal Kestis stands on his own, and he becomes so memorable after the credits roll in the game, and you can't help but want to see more of him. And another thing I really enjoyed in this game, where the writers of the game were very brave, and to take one canonical aspect of the Jedi versus the Dathomiri witches or the Night Sisters, which is confrontational by nature, and spin the idea on its head, and have Cal Kestis encounter a young witch called Sister Marion, and actually build a relationship of two. And it's not something that, he goes to Dathomir, he sees this young, beautiful woman, and automatically, he's swooning over her and vice versa. No, they start off as enemies. She's very much fueled by anger because of what the Jedi did in the Order 66, and how Count Dooku, if you guys remember the Clone Wars television show, Dooku and General Grievous go to the Dathomir and destroy the entire clan. She has a lot of animosity towards him and vice versa, but they learn to respect and understand each other because they're joined by a common cause. They got to fight this evil empire who mistreated both the Night Sisters and the Jedi Order, and they built this bond, which by the end of the game almost borders on some kind of romantic feelings they have for one another. And I can't help but hope for part 2 where that relationship is further explored, and we see that the Jedi are not really just these celibate monks. It's more in line with the original Star Wars trilogy, where the whole idea revolves around the family. It's Luke, it's his twin sister, it's his father, and his mother. It's a family that has a legacy and connection to the Force. So that was also a very interesting idea. I was very impressed with that. And first thing I wanted to mention is that Cal Kestis is one of the few people, Jedi or otherwise, who actually confronts Vader and survives. Now, I mentioned earlier that he doesn't do it without help of others, but still, to be able to go toe-to-toe with Vader, because the beginning portion of that duel is one-on-one. And I was so impressed with Cal Kestis' ability and his spirit and belief in himself and his powers that what he's doing is the just thing. That's the right thing to do. And he's able to fight Vader. And thank God, the way they portrayed Vader in the Jedi Fallen Order, he's not this superhuman. Yes, he's a powerful Jedi master, but we also see how he's held back by this cybernetic body. And he's not his former self, Anakin Skywalker. He was just a Jedi unleashed. Now he's held back by this machinery. It's the position that he put himself into, and that's what it means to be also tainted by the dark side. You know, when he goes against this young and eager Jedi Knight, he's also being wounded. And I found that such an even, grounded battle, but still at the end of the day, obviously Vader is much more experienced Jedi, and he's able to overpower Cal Kestis, and the young man is able to escape. Very well done duel, and how the young man is able to escape, it gives a lot of credence and justification to Cal Kestis. Now, last point of this video is, what do I hope to see in the future? Well, first and foremost, for those of you guys who watch my YouTube channel and who see my interaction with people on the Facebook group, Star Wars Timeline, a lot of you know that I wasn't the biggest fan of Luke Skywalker showing at the end of Season 2 Mandalorian. Partially because the way it was done, you know, I wasn't a huge fan of the CGI use. I really wanted Sebastian Stan or another young actor being recast of Luke Skywalker. And second of all, I felt he was just more of a plug to pacify a lot of angry and disgruntled Star Wars fans. He's like, oh, here you guys go. Here's Luke Skywalker. I feel that such a huge and powerful figure in Star Wars is Luke Skywalker. I mean, there is no bigger hero. He shouldn't be used so trivially. He should have his own show. He's supposed to have his own full-blown story. Using him as a cameo wasn't my thing. To be honest with you guys, for somebody who beat the game before the show came out, I was really, really rooting for Cal Kestis to show up. Or maybe even Quinlan Vos, whose fate is undecided. We don't know if he survives the events of the Order 66 or not. Or maybe even somehow Ezra Bridger made the return from the unknown regions of space by then, and he's the one who comes and picks up Grogu. But I really was rooting for Cal Kestis, to be honest with you. And when that X-Wing fighter shows up, I was still kind of like hopeful. Hey, what if this Cal Kestis, who he is there on a mission to gather Force sensitive, right, and restore the Jedi Order, which would make a tons of sense and would be a really good build up and setup for the future of the video game, and also for the Mandalorian show, showing these other capable Jedi coming forth. Because obviously Ahsoka Tano wasn't the one to answer the call. She said, look, I'm not going to be there because I don't believe in following the Jedi path anymore. So I wanted to see Cal Kestis there, but I also hope that they will use Cal Kestis in some sort of live action show. And the reason for that is because the main actor who portrays Cal Kestis, Cameron Monaghan, he's perfect age to represent him, and I think they should use the time wisely and not wait for too long, you know, when obviously the actor ages and doesn't look the part anymore. Use him in live action. I would enjoy to see, maybe if it's not a standalone Fallen Order TV series, maybe you write him in some sort of show, maybe even a Ahsoka show, where he shows up and he becomes a mainstay of that particular show that's not necessarily revolves around him. But he, I believe, could be a very strong presence and bring in his plot and be meaningful and interesting. And last thing that I really hope for, which I think is pretty much a given, is to see the Jedi Fallen Order Part 2 of the video game. When that game came out, for some very strange reason, EA, the company, the video game studio, was trying to put this idea for gamers that single-player games are not popular anymore. I think that's because they released their Star Wars Battlefront title. It didn't have any single-player campaign, and a lot of fans were displeased, and they kind of trashed the game, and they said, what is this? Where's the solo campaign? And only then they released it in kind of like Star Wars Battlefront 2, and even then it was like okay at best. They were trying to backtrack and say that its story games are not relevant anymore. And here comes the Jedi Fallen Order game, and I believe within its first year or two, it sold over 10 million copies, guys. That's a lot for a video game. That's a lot for any entertainment. And I'm pretty sure that cemented the fact that somewhere secretly, you know, behind the curtain, they're already working hard on the sequel. I mean, it's inevitable. When you're making this much money on the video game, we know that Part 2 is happening. So what do I hope to see in Part 2? I want to see the evolution of Cal Kestis. I want the story to take him into unexpected areas, perhaps the brush with the dark side. And I really want to see the relationship between him and Sister Merrin grow. And maybe not necessarily go in a kind of manner that I anticipate, the romantic relationship. Maybe they also put a twist on it and do something different with it. Maybe, you know, he will become this pilgrim who goes around the galaxy, and he charges Sister Merrin with becoming the keeper of the order that they're trying to rebuild and start training the next generation of the Jedi in the arts that she has. Because besides the Force powers, she also has this Dathomiri witch powers or magic powers that she could also bestow on a new generation of the Jedi Knights. So that would be cool to see. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video character highlight and you enjoyed the Jedi Fallen Order game as much as I have. I would love to hear your impressions on this game in the comment section below. Please consider subscribing to my channel. Hit that bell button so you don't miss my future character highlights and other cool videos that I make. And I will see you next time.